Our next big move was to set up temporary patrol base ADINZAI. It was near the village of ADINZAI, so we patrolled out into the green zone. It's about a kilometer into the green zone, maybe a bit further. We had to cross a lot of canals and things like that, which made it quite hard going at times. There's Lieutenant Cartwright, and we also had the recce force with us at times. These are the guys who had lost a lad a little bit earlier in the tour and had been doing some absolutely fantastic work. Here they are putting up a ground map so that we can sort of make sense of the area around us, you know, where the bazaar is and where all the main houses are and things like that, so we can plan patrols. We made ourselves at home, well, as homely as home can be in those conditions. We took over the rooms. Unfortunately, very often we did have too many soldiers to fit in all the rooms, so a lot of the guys had to sleep out in the open or in the corridors. But since this is the Afghan summer, it's actually not too bad because it was really, really warm and the weather was quite pleasant. There's one of our female medics who are absolutely brilliant on this tour. Goody and I also tried to get some sort of gym routine up and running. We obviously didn't have any weights or anything like that, which you would have up at the big bases, so we used mostly body weight. The lads would train with each other. I had my TRX cable there, so that we used that. And of course, nothing better after a workout than having cold water from the well thrown all over you. We eventually made the temporary checkpoint or temporary patrol base quite homely. As you can see there, we put in tables, allowed us to do weapons cleaning and that sort of thing while we waited to go on the next patrol. Here is Sergeant Langridge. He's in the temporary ops room, manning the radios together with Distiglione. He would end up getting shot later in the tour, but that story is still to come. The one really defining memory of ADINZAI was it was grenade heaven. Goodright and I both had the underslung grenade launcher, and we used to take part in daily deals with the Taliban, who used to come and try and pepper our base as well. We had eyes in the sky, which allowed us to figure out where their firing positions were, and then we would aim in their direction in advance. We knew the distance that we had to fire, and then as soon as they engaged with us, we absolutely made it rain and just dropped huge amounts of grenades back onto their position, as you will see here.
Right, I'm out.
200 meters?
Yeah.
Right.
Check fire!
Check fire! Boom, boom, boom. Love that sound.
Love that shit.
From a temporary patrol base, ADINZAI, we would head out on patrol. We were very close to the village of ADINZAI, so we would pop in there quite often, introduce ourselves to the locals, go into some of the shops, as you can see there. Not a hell of a lot to find in the shops. It's quite an impoverished area, and the locals very skeptical of you, as you can see. ADINZAI was very heavily seeded with IEDs though, so we did have the dog units with us very often, so we could locate the IEDs, either extract them or just avoid them. Searching ADINZAI market for IEDs.
Don't let that motorbike come past you. Don't let that motorbike.
This is where we found an ID yesterday, which Brimstone came and destroyed.
708 just says, can you ask them about James Hilton as well? See if they know whereabouts he is or any J2, we can give him that.
Yeah, I'm going to try.
Now, the main purpose for us being sort of in that area was to take pressure off other areas where there were some construction projects which they were trying to complete, and they were being harassed by the Taliban. So we went there with the intention of drawing them onto us. We'd go on those daily patrols. As you can see, we would very often get engaged. We would have Apache attack helicopters who would come in support of us when they were available. Absolutely fantastic piece of kit, almost like a flying tank. A lot of sensors on it, and very, very accurate. It's got a big gun on the front, rockets as well, but the one weapon which was absolutely fantastic was the Hellfire missile that you can see on the side there. And you really didn't want to be on the receiving end of this machine. So very often, if we came under fire, if we were under attack, we could call this machine in, and the machine gun on the front, which is exceptionally powerful, far stronger than any of the machine guns that we have in our disposal, could open up on the tree lines and absolutely rain down devastation on their positions. Also, the Hellfire missiles, which are exceptionally accurate, could really pinpoint a target and hammer it pretty hard. Very often, that was also followed up with the machine gun, just making sure that the job was well and truly done. And as you can see there, it just cuts through trees like an absolute chainsaw. So a great piece of kit that you really want on your side. I would really not like to have been facing it. As you can see there, smash. Really a great piece of kit, and came to our aid on many occasions. And also, if the Taliban were firing from behind a wall and hitting us, we had the capability of smashing the entire wall in. The Taliban were no fools, though. They really knew how to make the environment work best for them. They obviously spent many years fighting the Russians and perfecting techniques which would make life as difficult as possible for anyone coming into their area. One of the things they used to do was flood their fields, and the mud in Afghanistan is almost like clay. Once it gets flooded, you can actually just get completely stuck in it and can't get out. The one thing that this managed to do was made resupply by land exceptionally difficult to do. It was for this reason that we started to get most of our resupply by air, mainly by Chinooks, very often with underslung loads. As you can see there, they would fly in. The lads would know in advance that the Chinooks were inbound. We had set up a sort of perimeter defense, and then the load would be dropped, and then it really was a race against time to get all the lads out that we could possibly spare, get all the food that we could, all the ammunition that was dropped off, a lot of the water as well, depending if the well was working, and really manhandle that into the base as quickly as possible, get behind the walls, because of course it was a race against time. Every time the Taliban saw us do that, they saw it as an opportunity to hit us while we were out in the open. One night we set out, night vision goggles, all sneaky beaky. We headed out probably about 2Ks. We headed out to the banks of the Helmand River, where we were doing a sneaky a lurk. A lurk is where you pretty much head out at night, then hide in the bushes undercover, camouflaged, and then hopefully ambush your target early the next morning when they are heading into position. The boss is calling. The boss is calling. Unfortunately, after a few hours, it became obvious that our plan hadn't succeeded. The Taliban had taken the day off and weren't coming. So we head to the banks of the Helmand River. There you have Lieutenant Cartwright and Sergeant Langridge getting a beautiful photograph actually in the Helmand River, the famous Helmand River, but it was very exposed, so we didn't stay there long. And then we set up a temporary checkpoint where we documented the locals, got fingerprints and things like that, which we could compare to fingerprints that we had got off IEDs that we had dug up already. The dog was overheating at this point though, so we headed back to the river. Whoops, dropping my stuff. This is really a little bit open on the Helmand River. That's Karnaka on the other side, and that it's also quite a spicy area, so we shouldn't stay here too long. But that's our dog Viper and Taylor the owner. Because the IED threat was so high in our area, we very often had the dog unit with us who could sniff out IEDs and weapons and things like that. But it was absolutely great having them with us. The guys absolutely loved, obviously, playing with the dog, spoiling the dog, washing the dog and keeping the dog cool in the heat. But he did sometimes need to be carried over canals and things like that, which was often quite entertaining. But for all the fun and games, things were getting a little bit too close for comfort. Edis, one of our main hornmen, stood over a low wall on a patrol and was hit by an IED and had a chunk of his calf blown off. But he was very, very lucky. But it was just one more lad that we lost and had to go home. Literally 2 or 3 days later, I was sitting up on Stag in a temporary patrol base at ADINZAI, and I saw an IED go off at a distance. Obviously threw a whole lot of dust in the air and twigs and branches and things like that. And I didn't know that we had a patrol on the ground. I didn't think any of our lads were out. So I thought it was an own goal. I thought the Taliban had been digging something in and it had gone off, or a local had stood on it. What I didn't realize was a good mate of mine, John Wilson, was coming into the base. He was with the Queen's Company, or had been with the Queen's Company, and was now heading down to join our patrol base. They had got to a canal very, very close. Not really a canal, more like an irrigation ditch. Very close to where Edis had been hit, literally probably 50 to 100 meters away. What happened was the platoon sergeant, I'm hell of a mad about this, the platoon sergeant, we had an officer with us at the time, and they decided to take a certain route. In hindsight, it probably wasn't the best route selection. The route was horned though. They used the ground penetrating radar to see if anything was there. Unfortunately, that didn't pick anything up. The lads proceeded over a low bridge, and a number of lads actually walked straight over this IED. John, I think, was number 6th or 7th in the line of the patrol, and he ended up unfortunately standing on this device, and it wasn't a sort of small one as some of the others had been. the device went off. It blew him high up into the air. He came down onto the bridge, and people had to give him emergency first aid, of course, putting tourniquets on both legs. Obviously, the biggest threat when that happens is the loss of blood. So they have to stop the loss of blood from the femoral artery in the legs. But John did become a little bit of a legend in that once they had him on a stretcher and they were making their way to the evacuation point where the helicopters were coming in, the female medic ran up next to him and said, "Don't worry, John, you'll be fine," giving him reassurance. And of course, John, being the absolute mad lad that he is, looked up at the medic and said, "I need some morale, get your tits out, love." And only John Wilson could say that after an incident like that. But John was put on the helicopter. We didn't see him again that tour, obviously. He went to Selly Oaks, the hospital in England, which dealt with those severe injuries. And he got a lot of medical attention, and obviously had a very tough route of rehabilitation and things like that. But he's made a great recovery. So, thank God, after a horrible incident, at least it didn't end in a fatality.